90% of Americans working right now will never actually retire. Not retire comfortably. Not retire late. Never retire at all. They will work until their body gives out or they will run out of money trying. That is not an opinion. That is what the math says. And in the next 15 minutes, I am going to show you the exact numbers, the exact mistakes, and the exact reason why almost nobody sees this coming until it is too late. This is Ron, and if you have ever wondered whether you are actually on track or just hoping you are, stay with me, because this one might scare you a little. But before we get into it, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because I break down the real numbers behind money every single week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Let's start with a number that should stop you in your tracks. The average American between the ages of 55 and 64 has less than $90,000 saved for retirement. Not the median, not the poorest households, the average. And when you actually run the math on what that money needs to do, you realize it is not even close to enough. Here is why. Financial experts generally agree that to retire safely, you need to be able to withdraw around 4% of your savings every year without running out of money. 4% of $90,000 is $3,600. That is $300 a month. You cannot pay rent with that. You cannot cover groceries with that. You cannot survive on that, let alone live. And Social Security is not going to save you either. The average Social Security check right now is around $1,900 a month. Combine that with your own tiny savings, and you are still living below the poverty line in most major cities in America. This is the retirement reality for the majority of people heading into their final working years, and almost nobody is talking about it honestly. So how did we get here? It is not because people are lazy. It is not because people do not care about their future. It is because the entire system quietly shifted, and most people never got the memo. Let's go back about 40 years. Before the 1980s, most American workers had something called a pension. Your employer set aside money for your retirement automatically, managed it for you, and guaranteed you a monthly check for the rest of your life once you retired. You did not have to be a financial expert. You did not have to pick stocks. You just had to show up to work, and the system took care of the rest. Then came the 401k. On paper, it sounded like an upgrade. More control, more flexibility, potentially higher returns. But here is what nobody explained clearly at the time. It also transferred all of the risk, all of the responsibility, and all of the guesswork from the company onto you. Now, instead of a guaranteed pension, you get an account that you have to fund yourself, invest yourself, and manage yourself for 40 years straight without making a major mistake. One recession at the wrong time. One medical emergency, one job loss in your 50s. Any one of those can wipe out a decade of progress. And most people are not financial professionals. They were never trained for this. They were just handed the responsibility and told, good luck. Now let's talk about the second brutal piece of math, compound interest, and more specifically, what happens when you start late. If you start investing $300 a month at age 25 and you earn an average return of 7% a year, which is roughly the historical average of the stock market after inflation, by the time you are 65, you would have close to $700,000. That is the power of 40 years of compounding. Now here is the brutal part. If you start that exact same $300 a month at age 45, instead of 25, you only end up with around $150,000 by age 65. Same monthly contribution, same return, 20 fewer years, and the result is nearly 5 times less money. That is not a small gap. That is the entire difference between retiring and never retiring. And here is the part that makes this even more brutal. Most Americans do not start seriously saving for retirement until their late 30s or early 40s, often because they are buried under student loans, credit card debt, childcare costs, or simply living paycheck to paycheck just to survive. By the time they are financially able to start saving seriously, they have already lost the most powerful years of compounding, and there is no way to get that time back. You cannot buy back lost decades. Time is the one input in this formula that money cannot replace. Now let's talk about the third problem, and this one hides in plain sight: inflation and lifestyle costs. 30 years ago, the average cost of a home was around 3 times the average household income. Today, in most major cities, it is closer to 7 or 8 times the average income. Healthcare costs have risen faster than wages for over 2 decades straight. Childcare in many states now costs more per year than college tuition did a generation ago. So even for people who are trying to save, trying to do everything right, a bigger and bigger percentage of their income is being swallowed by basic survival costs before they even get the chance to invest. Wages have not kept pace with the actual cost of living, which means the traditional advice of just save 15% of your income simply does not work the same way it used to. Because for a huge portion of Americans, there is no 15% left over at the end of the month. Now let's bring in the fourth factor, and this is the one that catches people the most off guard: longevity. People are living longer than ever before, which sounds like good news until you realize what it actually means financially. If you retire at 65 and live until 85 or 90, that is 20 to 25 years of expenses with no paycheck coming in. Most retirement plans from a generation ago were built assuming people would only live 10 or 15 years past retirement. That assumption is no longer true, and it means your money has to stretch significantly further than most people are planning for. So when you put all four of these pieces together, low average savings, the shift away from pensions, lost decades of compounding, rising cost of living, and increased life expectancy, you start to see exactly why the math is so brutal. It is not one single mistake that is causing this. It is four separate systemic shifts happening at the same time, and most people are only aware of maybe one of them, if that. But here is the important part, and this is where I want you to really pay attention, because this video is not meant to scare you into doing nothing. It is meant to wake you up while you still have time to act. The people who do retire successfully are not the ones who earn the most money. They are the ones who understood these four factors early and adjusted accordingly. That usually means three things. Number one, they started investing as early as possible, even with small amounts, because time matters more than the size of the contribution. Number two, they automated their savings, so it happened before they had the chance to spend the money on something else. And number three, they treated retirement savings as a non-negotiable expense, the same as rent or a car payment, instead of something they would get around to eventually. None of that requires being a genius. It requires being consistent, starting early, and understanding the real math, instead of guessing and hoping it works out. So here is the truth. 90% of Americans are on track to work forever, or run out of money trying, not because they are bad with money, but because the system quietly shifted the entire burden onto their shoulders, and most people never got the warning in time. You just did. The good news is, understanding the math is the first step to beating it. The people who retire successfully are not luckier than everyone else. They simply started earlier, stayed consistent, and paid attention to numbers like the ones we just went through. If this video opened your eyes even a little, that is exactly why I make these. This is Ron, and if you want more breakdowns like this, real numbers, real strategies, and no fluff, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and I will see you in the next one.